Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this Thursday's episode of the Niche Cast. We're from the niche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sports live on the website. Right now, we have a New Zealand Warriors kind of season debrief that I did. And as I thought a lot about the season debrief type of stuff, I kept coming back to this idea, which I did share in the Monday podcast, that a lot of what the Warriors need, they already have. And that's in their youngsters coming through. So that was the main theme of my season debrief for the Warriors, especially like as I wrote it, I was realizing everything they did last summer set up this season. And you could see the signs of a really good summer training period where the Warriors were straight away a top 8 team pretty much. So it's like that reflects well on the off-season training. The youngsters were prepared to the point where they impressed in the NRL trials, like watching Sifakula in the trials, Mai Uu in the trials, a little bit of Leotawa in the trials. Those youngsters were ready for NRL trials, which was impressive. And all the youngsters quickly progressed into the New South Wales Cup team that was really good. So everything from last summer set up this season. So now we're about to enter the summer again. And everyone's got a full year of Warriors stuff under Webster. So that was the pretty much the off-season angle for the Warriors. So that debrief is live on our website right now, as well as National League wraps for both men's and women's. Those deep dives are there on our website for you National League football freakazoids. Apparently NZ Breakers are starting the season as well. So we've got a bit of a primer on our website to get you ready for Breakers basketball. The NRL Grand Final preview for the Kiwi-NRL stuff will be live Thursday afternoon. And I also have an NRLW preview for their Grand Final coming up as well. Football Ferns All Whites need to be debriefed. And I'm sure I'll find some cricket stuff to write about over the coming days as well. So check out our website, the niche-case.com. And if you are enjoying all the Niche Case Mahi, the podcast, the website, and of course our newsletter, you can support everything about the Niche Case through Patreon, patreon.com/EL Niche Case. Joining the Patreon whānau, you'll support us straight up the guts. And at the moment, we're offering an extra podcast every week, the Subscriber Podcast, which comes out via Patreon, and Substack for the paid Substack subscribers. We appreciate everyone who's here with us now, but it's so important that we celebrate the people supporting us on Patreon and through Substack with a paid Substack subscription, because that's what's pretty much funding everything about the Niche Case at the moment. So those options are available. The newsletter via Substack, though, is completely free. That is just free for everyone to sign up to, the nichecase.substack.com. That comes out every Monday and Friday evening, sent straight to you, with things written specifically for the newsletter, and all the links to the website, and all the podcast information, and everything I just said is pretty much in that newsletter. So sign up to it, and you get the Niche Case sent straight to you. Before discussing some sport, I need some mindfulness. Hit us up.
Well, we always like a good gratitude mindfulness, and I happened to stumble upon a particularly good one here from about 800 years ago or something along those lines, from Catholic philosopher Meister Eckhart, saying something slightly un-Catholic, but still. Fantastic quote that goes, "If the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough."
We talk a lot about gratitude here in the mindfulness, in the Niche Case. Like, things do get really airy-fairy in our mindfulness, and we're generally airy-fairy characters, but the gratitude is so, like, the gratitude doesn't feel airy-fairy at all. The gratitude just feels like completely grounded to the earth, and a lot of airy fairy stuff, whether it's like, oh, manifestation, or oh, I need to raise my vibration and all this stuff, super airy fairy stuff. There's not a lot of practicality to it, you know, like it's hard to really nail down practical, free, easy to do things to improve your well-being and improve your, basically your life. As we said on Monday, deploying gratitude is the easiest thing to do. It is incredibly practical. And while we aren't religious figures, we are religious to the land of Aotearoa, but we're not religious figures here. The fact that some ancient Catholic gratitude has been deployed here only highlights the value of gratitude. So shout out to whoever that Jerry, the Catholic guy, was, and shout out to everyone who is grateful for something today, and we are grateful for you listening. How about that?
Yeah, shout out to Meister Eckhart of the Middle Ages. I'm imagining he's one of them fellas who, like, you know, back in the day where the priests were bald and wore like brown robes and whatnot. You know, I'm picturing him along those lines. But of course, there are no photos. The fact that they've recorded a saying that he said is and kept it alive this long is itself impressive enough, and a great saying too. Do particularly like, it's one thing to your point there about how easy gratitude is, and it's like it's easy, it's grounded. The other thing it is it's immediate. Like, there are other things which you can do which will pay off in the long run. Gratitude is one of those things which instantly improves you in some, even if it's just in some small way. Every improvement is valuable, you know. The other point is the idea of thinking of it as a prayer, is because it's like the idea of thank you being a prayer. It's not necessarily the kind of thing that people pray for. If you imagine just like the cliche, people want to ask God for stuff, you know. Here's just an example of all you need to say. It is sufficient to just say thank you. And if you think about that in just any context, you're saying thank you to another person who's done you a favor or something like that, and you think of that as a form of prayer, I think that's quite an interesting perspective to have on gratitude as well. I don't know, that's what stuck out to me when I saw that, and I thought, you know, that's got the brain ticking over a little bit. I might have to use that.
Yeah, you had visions of some bald monk chap. Anyone who's
Age of Empires type fellow.
any chap who's that deep into gratitude, I imagine, is some, you know, someone smoking big deck on the Aotearoa vitamins with the Aotearoa vibration. So big up everyone. Busy show on our menu today. Lots of great Aotearoa sport to digest. To help describe what we do on the Subscriber podcast, which is the bonus podcast we have every week, we did touch on a little bit of Blackcaps. We also went deep into Tyler Binden and Matt Dibley-Diaz, some eligibility recruits from All Whites coach Darren Baisley. So that is there for the football fans as well. Subscriber podcast, we do usually touch on some Blackcaps cricket. And one thing we talked about was how the Blackcaps might play their cricket at this World Cup. Because there did seem to be a bit of a suggestion in their selections that with Finn Allen not being in the squad, replaced by Will Young, they may go about their batting in a different way. So Finn Allen up top, ODI World Cup, he's going to bang boundaries and they're going to get off to a rollicking start. You might have the safety net of Williamson. Maybe Will Young's there, maybe Daryl Mitchell's there. You've got Conway. You've got good support around Finn Allen, so you can have a whack and kind of readjust. Without Finn Allen, everyone's just classy. Everyone's crafty. Everyone has strokes, but they are also just really good all-round batters. So if you do have a Blackcaps top order of Devon Conway, Will Young, Daryl Mitchell, Kane Williamson, Tom Latham, those lads are equipped to bat through a whole innings and really control the tempo and the structure of the innings. So that seems like a stylistic guide for how the Blackcaps might go about their batting. especially when you've then got Glenn Phillips coming in later on to have a whack. You might have Jimmy Neesham having a whack. What are the bowlers going to do? They're going to have a whack. So I think the Blackcaps are still chasing scores of 300, but they might go about it just a bit differently to how other teams are going to do it and how they might have done it with Van Allen. Similar ideas that we have often talked about with the Blackcaps, cricket. I have along the same lines. They are a great fielding team. I think they might be the best fielding team at this World Cup. They're always a good fielding team, but when you think like, okay, you've got Santner, he's a great fielder, Devon Conway's a great fielder, Daryl Mitchell catches everything. Those lads are going to stop a lot of runs, they're going to take their catches, they're going to chase the ball to the boundary. They all are really good fielders. And that is an asset for the Blackcaps at a World Cup. The other thing I was pondering was in the IPL, there's been this idea about test bowling being a factor, where you get the really good seamers and they're going to swing the ball, they're going to bowl a heavy length, top or off type of stuff, especially early on. And you mentioned this about the Blackcaps getting a bit of new ball, swing, seam, and trying to rip through opposition teams through that seam bowling unit. This feels a bit similar to the Australians because you're probably going to have Trent Boult, Tim Southee, and Matt Henry. That's a highly capable Blackcaps test bowling lineup right there. The Aussies are probably going to play with Pat Cummins, Mitchell Starc, and Josh Hazlewood as well. So yeah, the Blackcaps have spinners. Yeah, it's going to be in India where spin is going to be a factor. But a strength of the Blackcaps bowling or team, I believe, is that trio of seam bowlers who have played cricket in India. They do know how to move the ball both ways. They do know how to restrict run scoring in an age where everyone just whacks boundaries. And they are mature lads who know how to get the job done. So I don't think it's like these are any hot takes or like groundbreaking insights, but I do think crafty batters in the top four, great fielding, and test match bowling with the new ball and the seam department. I think those are three key elements of Blackcaps cricket ahead of this World Cup.
Yeah, this is following on perfectly from the subscriber podcast. This is the sequel. People got to subscribe and go listen to that one first because it's basically where we finished and ran out of time to go deeper on this idea. But I think it's really interesting the fact that it's not some kind of dramatic hot takey thing. I think it's quite interesting that the Blackcaps have just laid out their formula for all to see. For anyone who's paying attention, at least, you can see how they're going to play at the World Cup. And I mean, it's not that different to how they went at the last World Cup. It's good tournament cricket. It's the value of their experience of knowing how to do these things. It's understanding that despite what anyone says hyping up the tournament and previews, generally speaking, at the World Cup, when the best teams are playing the best teams, you can shave 30 to 50 runs off the so-called expectation of the score because the pressure is going to do that to people. It's the Blackcaps knowing how to do that. It's the knowing how to squeeze out runs through the middle overs when they're batting because they've got the talent to do that. It's knowing how to not concede runs throughout because their fielding is that good, like saving, 20 runs a game, maybe taking that extra catch for a key wicket at a tough time. And it's getting wickets up front because their seam bowlers are good and know how to hit their spots and know how to threaten batters and whatnot. Like, I think there's a funky trend in that plays through all three of those points, which is those seam bowlers, because I think those seam bowlers play such an important part in the batting because they can afford to be to put it in maybe some more like tangible a way about the batting strategy. It's like if Finn Allen's there, first 10 overs, you need to have 80 runs on the board. Like if things are going to plan, you got to be like 80 for one, 80 for two, plus better than that, whatever. Finn Allen doesn't have to be there after 10 overs, but he just needs to have scored like 30 to 50 runs at a strike rate of, I don't know, 120 plus. If he really gets going, that's up like 180 to 200. You know, we know what Finn Allen's capable of. Might put a pin in that idea because I do have a question I want to ask you on that. But without Finn Allen, the difference becomes, 60 without loss is a good first 10. You don't have to be scoring above a run a ball. You just have to keep those wickets in hand and get those guys in because you can score. They know they can then continue to score at 4, 5, 6 runs and over through the middle overs because they're all crafty batters who have a variety of ways of scoring. That's important. But also they have sluggers at the end. And if you're going to bat slower at the start, you need to bat quicker at the end. And that's kind of what the Blackcaps seem to be setting up as saying, we're going to be that team. We don't need to score at a steady pace the whole time or get out in front and then just hold it. We're going to be that team that sets it up for the last 10 to 15 overs the way people used to do in ODI cricket. And like Glenn Phillips is going to be a guy who can do some closer stuff. If Mark Chapman or Jimmy Neesham play, they're obviously guys who can do some closer stuff, whichever top order guys still out there, they can do some closer stuff. But I think the thing that allows them is the fact that their bowlers can all just come in and hit sixes from ball one. They've got bowlers who can do that. The reason the Blackcaps fielding is so good is because there's no weak links, because their bowlers, particularly their pace bowlers, are all fantastic. Tim Southey's one of the best catchers in the world. Trent Bolt is just lightning quick, super fit. He covers everything. He takes some absolute screamers throughout his career. And then, of course, the bowlers take care of the bowling because that's the day job. But in many ways, that's the strength of the Blackcaps team, is that their bowlers aren't just like their bowlers are very good at that, but they just fit into the overall strategy in a way where you're not having to make concessions for anyone. And I think that it's a steady, it's a consistent way of playing cricket. It's also an extremely Blackcapsy way of playing cricket. If you have any response to that, otherwise I do have a question about Finn Allen.
I believe Trent Bolt is the best athlete in cricket.
I mean, I'm not going to disagree.
In the world,
if it's not him, it might be Glenn Phillips. So,
I think Trent Bolt's a better athlete than Glenn Phillips. I believe he's
well.
Fitter.
You know what I think tips it for me is the fact that Trent Bolt is a tougher gig being a fast bowler. Like there's more running, there's more sort of intensity involved. He's gone through his whole career with basically no serious injuries. Like he's whenever he misses games is because he's unavailable for like personal reasons or whatever, or he's having a rest, or he doesn't have a contract, or it's never because he can't play. And like you get Neil Wagner, who's another very fit guy, but he's often injured and he just battles through it. And that's different. Trent Bolt doesn't have to battle through a broken toe; he just never gets injured. I think that's the thing that sets his fitness aside. All those runs up Mount Maunganui,
yeah, for sure. I was going to mention this in a jiffy, but you said Neil Wagner. If the Blackcaps need a batter, Neil Wagner's your man. He's a lefty, and he just hit 72 runs for Somerset in County Championship, which is his highest first-class score. Previous best was 70. He hit 72, batting number 10 with a strike rate of 92. So he wasn't straight up having a whack. There was a bit of hard mahi there, but he also had a whack. He also looked absolutely sensational. So shout out Neil Wagner, Blackcaps all-rounder. He's still doing his thing. Not so many wickets at the moment, but he's doing something. He's either taking one wicket or he's scoring runs. So shout out Neil Wagner. What was that pin you had?
Pin was about the switch from Finn Allen to Will Young. What do you think the reasoning behind that was? Like, do you think that's a case of we tried Finn Allen and he's not ready yet, and so we're going to go with a more steady thing? Do you think it's because Will Young's just been a better batter and therefore he's earned that spot ahead of Allen? Or do you think it is that strategic, like, tournament cricket, we need to play in this way because this is how we've been successful in the past, and it just makes a little bit more sense to lean on Will Young in that? Like, do you think there was a a motivating factor or some combination of the lot with what is a relatively dramatic decision to be made this close to World Cup, although it's sooner than they made it last time when they dropped Colin Munro midway through the World Cup. That could be a factor as well. A lesson learned, wanting to get out in front of it. But what do you think the motivating factor is there? The overwhelming one, anyway.
I believe Will Young's a better batter. So I think that is probably the most overwhelming factor, is that Will Young's a better batter, and that played out over the last few months. Will Young has been scoring runs in different formats. Finn Allen hasn't been that great, and this just makes you realize like it was a bit of a weird move to start. Like, I could see the plan, but if anyone who knows anything about Finn Allen's kind of domestic cricket stuff, he scores runs when he's having a whack. He doesn't necessarily score runs when he's doing other things, when he has to work through difficult bowling, when he has to scamper between the wickets, when he has to try and manufacture a drizzle of runs under pressure.
If you saw him in Bangladesh, like, he could not get a single to save his life. So he could hit some boundaries now and then, but he couldn't get off strike when he was under pressure, which I think is a little bit of a problem in one-day cricket, less so in T20s.
And like if I'm trying to be a bit nicer about it all, the Blackcaps selectors and coaching staff, they gave Finn Allen an opportunity. They were the ones who were closest to watching Finn Allen bat. So if there is a weakness, they would have seen it. Yeah. And that, combined with maybe a crystallization for them on how they want to play at the World Cup, the players available, different injuries that have happened. Like, a lot of things have shaken up the Blackcaps World Cup squad. Whether it's Williamson's injury, Southey's injury, Bracewell's injury, all these different factors, maybe how the IPL was played this year, I don't know. Maybe it's just Will Young scoring runs. But there has been a change in their strategy. And I think it all comes together. It's not necessarily that Finn Allen wasn't scoring runs or Will Young was scoring runs, or if it was just a change in strategy. I think it's a lot of those factors coming together that has seen the change. And regardless of how we got here, I think it's the right move. Especially when you look at all those,
I tend to agree as well.
Like, the top four pretty much all average over 40 in ODI cricket, as we've said a few times. So I think they came to the right decision, and it's still baffling. Like, Finn Allen hasn't played in the IPL yet. So for all the hoopla about his contract, all the hoopla about who Finn Allen is as an international slugger, he hasn't played IPL. And he hasn't really dominated for the Blackcaps a whole lot for this ODI cycle. I think back to the T20 World Cup last year. Like, I think Finn Allen's a better T20 player than Martin Guptill. Especially when you're playing that. Like, I think Martin Guptill's a better batter than Finn Allen. I think Martin Guptill's a better ODI batter opener than Finn Allen. But for a T20 World Cup in Australia, I wasn't mad at Finn Allen getting that crack. Coming into an ODI World Cup where the Blackcaps seem to be embracing their Kiwi identity, that identity skews a lot more towards Will Young than it does Finn Allen. I think Finn Allen, if we're getting into that identity kind of bag, he's more of a highlights reel Indian kind of opener, as opposed to a true...
Well, he's a T20 opener, really.
Yeah.
That's where he earned his opportunities. They just extended it into the ODI stuff where maybe he hadn't, even in domestic stuff, hadn't really done that, hadn't really earned that in that form specifically. They tried it. They've moved on from it, I guess. Fair enough. He might come back around. He's a good player, but I agree that Will Young is clearly the superior batter in most areas, particularly in ODI cricket as an opener, though. He doesn't
have a whole lot of first-class runs. His Ford Trophy runs come when he's having a whack. He did dominate the Super Smash, whereas Will Young dominates the Super Smash and also averages over 40 in list A cricket, and also is good enough to play Test cricket. That's the difference in batting between them two. Because Will Young smashed boundaries in the Super Smash. A lot of batters can smash boundaries in the Super Smash if we're being straight up about it. So it's not
Well, Will Young has a Super Smash 100, so there you go.
Exactly, and who was batting alongside Fenelon when he was smashing in the Super Smash? It was Devon Conway.
Devon Conway.
So the point here is that Fenelon wasn't necessarily doing anything unique, which is a very interesting idea when you consider he hasn't played IPL and he's fallen out of favor with the Blackcaps. That is a very interesting thing to look back on a few years removed from when Fenelon was generating all sorts of hype from Super Smash whacking. Looking back at it, a lot of lads are whacking in the Super Smash. So I don't think it's that special, Just quickly, the White Ferns play tonight, second ODI against South Africa. They did lose the first ODI. The White Ferns need to win some ODIs, and I'm interested to see how the second game goes. South Africa were too good generally. Laura Woolvart, their captain, scored a 50. Chloe Tryon smacked it around lower down. The White Ferns did mention on Monday, Hannah Rowe, Izzy Gaze, Brooke Halliday did score runs. I don't think that's sustainable because everything about their careers for the White Ferns suggests that it's not sustainable. I think South Africa will do a lot of research on some of those lesser known White Ferns, and I'm curious to see how the second game goes because that stuff is offset by the fact that the big four players didn't score any runs, so they're probably going to score runs, right? All of which is fascinating. It's fascinating for the White Ferns as a entity under Ben Sawyer because he hasn't really turned them into a great team. Like, I don't know if Ben Sawyer is better than Bob Carter, straight up. And also the White Ferns are near the bottom. They're not at the bottom, but they are near the bottom of the Women's Championship. And that's because they don't win a lot of ODI games, and they did lose the ODI series in Sri Lanka earlier this year. So if they lose this one, they've lost 2 ODI series in a row. And again, that's the Ben Sawyer era. So, yeah, really interested to see what happens tonight. Hopefully the White Ferns bounce back like the Silver Ferns did. Credit to the Silver Ferns getting up over that England B team. So shout out to them. We'll wait and see how the White Ferns go tonight against South Africa. Any final cricket thoughts?
No, I suppose we ought to talk. We've got a couple other things on the agenda, so we might have to keep it rolling.
We do have a absolute bumper weekend in the NRL. We got an NRL grand final between the Panthers and Broncos. 2 teams with Kiwi-NRL lads in it, 2 teams with very deep Kiwi-NRL roots in their junior system as well. 2 teams that go about their development the same way. And we also have Titans versus Knights in the NRL Women's Grand Final, which I am really excited about. Like, those players, all sorts of little wrinkles and nuances to discuss. So we will crack into NRL Rugby League coming up. I did see where the Damian Lillard trade has happened for those sport freaks who have been following it. Interestingly, last night I was actually thinking this is completely random, it's a bit of a waste of time, but I do want to chuck it out there. Eddie Jones, Wallabies coach, right?
For now.
For now. Well, all that matters is now. Again, mindfulness.
Yep, that's true.
Present
that's
in
true.
the moment.
Stay in the moment.
It makes a lot of sense why the Wallabies suck when Eddie Jones appoints an attack coach and a defense coach from rugby league. Jason Riles, he had a bit of a situation. He was going to go to the Dragons. He was working with the Roosters this season. All of that fell through. He joins the Wallabies, I believe, as their attack coach. I don't know exactly. I don't have the tab open, but yeah, because I was amazed at how he was the attack coach for the Wallabies. Their defense coach, I think, is Brett Hodgson, who was appointed earlier this year. So in a World Cup year, the Wallabies appointed an attack coach and a defense coach for the World Cup, both from rugby league. None of that makes sense. And along the same lines, I was pondering how it's all about, player empowerment era, all this stuff. Damian Lillard, the whole point of him leaving the Portland Trailblazers was that he said he wants to join the Miami Heat.
Yeah. And in doing so, spoiled all the leverage that the Miami Heat had to trade for him because everyone else knew they weren't in the ballpark, so the Heat didn't have to put out their best offer. And now they didn't get him.
It's so strange. Like, I don't really understand. But I do like to think I understand rugby league, which is why, I didn't understand the Wallabies' decisions, but I do understand how the Wallabies haven't been very good when they've basically appointed 2 rugby league coaches to do their attack and defense, which is the equivalent of
Stacey Jones and Monty Beetham or something. The All Blacks, maybe they need. Maybe that's
Monty
what the All Blacks
Beetham's not a
need.
coach. Let's be fair.
No, okay, we'll pick
Right.
a genuine.
It's
Stephen Kearney.
yeah. So the All Blacks appoint Stacey Jones and Stephen Kearney as their assistant coaches for Razor Robertson. That makes no sense at all, but it's a bit of a laugh. I could have saved it for the Monday giggle, but it's here now. NRL Grand Final, Panthers versus Broncos. I'm really interested about this because, just to boil it down, no team except for the Panthers has a forward pack that can rival the Broncos. And the 2 players that are in that Panthers forward pack who have started in back-to-back grand final wins are James Fisher-Harris and Moses Leota, both of whom I think will be starting props for the Aotearoa Kiwis. I think they are the most important players for the Panthers. Because the Broncos, why did the Broncos offload so much against the Warriors? A great idea for anyone who's learning about rugby or rugby league is that offloads come from winning the collision. Offloads come from dominating your opponent physically. There are players and there are teams who try to offload as a starting tactic. But offloads come from winning the collision. Sonny Bill was one of the best offloaders because he always poked through the defense. He won the collision. Then he offloads. Against the Warriors especially, the Broncos won the collisions. They were dominant physically. They were more aggressive. So then they offload. And it makes sense, whether it's poking through the defense or you're tackled but you can still get your arm free. All of that stems from winning the collision, winning the tackle. That is a mark of the Broncos' physicality. Obviously, the names, Payne Haas, Flegler, Carrigan, they're all ridiculous as middle forwards. And I'm just zoning in on that middle forward trio. Fisher, Harris, and Leota can stop that, I believe. And no other team in the NRL can match the Broncos forward pack for physicality and aggression except for the Panthers. And Moses Leota's really kind of hit a neck level this season. His minutes have gone up while Fisher Harris's minutes have gone down. And I think I've said it, I've dropped this seed a few times, but Moses Leota's equally as physically dominant and aggressive, and all those words I repeat often. He's equal as Fisher Harris now. There was, I think earlier this season, I think he might have been running at Wairea Hargraves, and he's shouting as he runs. And he's always flying up off the line. He's fast, he's aggressive, he's a monster. And all of that is Fisher Harris as well. Fisher Harris has just been doing it for longer minutes and longer in terms of seasons. But now Fisher Harris, I think, just with his workload for the Kiwis, his workload for the Panthers, they do a better job of managing his minutes and his game time. But now him and Leota are equals to me. And that's what you need to defeat the Broncos. And so, given that rugby league games are won and lost in the middle, given that the Broncos have basically the second best, I believe, middle forward trio in the NRL, given how the Broncos dominate their opponents with their forward pack, for the Panthers to win, I think Fisher Harris is the best player on the park, and I think Leota is right behind him. So I want to see Fisher Harris be the best player on the field. I think the Panthers, everything about the Panthers, their experience, how they play the footy, how they play the rugby league, all of that suggests they are going to win a third grand final in a row. That's just my gut hunch. That's just simplifying everything down. And I think Fisher Harris is the most important player, closely followed by Moses Leota. And that is I'm really excited about that because, there's a chance for them to be the Aotearoa Kiwis starting prop duo. As I said, like Wairai Hargraves is out suspended. Jesse Bromwich hasn't been in great form. He's also been out injured. And if you're coming in Aotearoa Kiwis starting middle forward trio, Fisher Harris, Leota, and Joseph Tapine, that is really cool. But yeah, I'm just so excited to see if Fisher Harris and Leota can really slow down the Broncos and set that platform for their team. And if that happens, I can see a situation where old Fisher Harris wins the MVP, whatever it's called, the Churchill, the Clive. And that would be exciting. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, watching that Warriors Broncos semi-final, like the thing that stood out there is just how incredibly dynamic the Broncos were. And like they've been doing that all season, but to see it in a finals game against a really good team, to see them still operating to where they're giving them as you say, dominating the collisions. They're playing at a quicker tempo. They're more powerful. They seem faster. I thought that was an unbelievably good performance from the Broncos, and the Warriors did quite well to hang in there for a long time, and they were in that game for. I mean, the forward pass from Reece Walsh killed it, but I don't think that was the point at which the Warriors were, close to getting back into it. The point was when they had it was late, right at the end of the first half. The Broncos made a couple errors, which would make sense. A big dynamic team making mistakes later in the half when you're a bit more fatigued, right before you get that break. And the Warriors had, I think, 3 consecutive sets where they were in good starting field position, and they made errors all 3 times. And it's like, well, there's your chance. You got to get it back within 6 points at halftime. Who knows? But so it goes. Like the Broncos got out in front because it just that word dynamic. It just stuck with me watching them, because it's not just that they're fast, it's that they're powerful, it's that they're strong, it's that they seem to be thinking ahead. I guess that's the advantage you have, is when you can boss that stuff, you can sort of, if you're in control, you get to actually make the next decision, because you know what situation you're going to be in, because you're controlling the game. And yeah, like the workload of someone like Carrigan was insane, and it's the same across the board with them. But like the Panthers kind of did that to the Warriors as well. They did it in a different way. Like the Panthers are more efficient. The Panthers are sort of like they don't make mistakes. They're so classy. They're so like they flow like a river when they're on attack. Cleary just makes great decisions over and over and over. The Broncos was something we talked about a lot in the preview last week, is the Broncos take risks and make mistakes, but also they have this X factor that's just a step above. I think that's a fascinating matchup, because there's 2 teams who it stems from the same thing, is just how like it's dudes like Fisher Harris and Payne Haas and what. It stems from there, but then the way they use the control and the dominance that they earn is a little bit different. And I think it's a fascinating grand final. And I think we saw very, 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 very clearly, for anyone who didn't think so leading into the preliminary finals, these are the 2 best teams, and they absolutely deserve to be there. And how that plays out in the grand final, I'd have to look back on a few of them, but I don't know how many times it's felt like we've had the two best teams throughout the whole season in a grand final recently. It often feels like there's, the Panthers make it, and then there's, the Eels made it one year, the Raiders made it one year, just getting in the form team, but not necessarily the best team throughout the year. There might be a couple, like there was Panthers Storm. Was it last year or the year before? You could make a case for. But this is without a doubt like the two best teams from week one through to the grand final are there. And how it plays out from here is an interesting test of two elite teams doing elite things, but with slightly different sort of secondary intentions on top of how they set things up.
I think there's a chance for Fisher Harris to double down on being the best prop in the world of rugby league. Because you think, Fanua Blake, he won the Dally M prop of the year, I think. Right? So anytime it's mentioned, Fanua Blake, he's one of the best. But then there's Payne Haas. Well, I think Fisher Harris is better than Fanua Blake, straight up. And we're going to see if Fisher Harris is better than Payne Haas. Because Payne Haas is going to be trying to stop the Panthers' middles, and Fisher Harris is going to try to be stopping the Broncos' middles as well. And I think if Fisher Harris turns out like a dominant grand final performance, his third grand final win in a row alongside Leota, I think Fisher Harris is undisputedly the best prop in the NRL.
Would see him or Blake Lawrie, so yeah.
That was a pause for effect there.
I said either. It doesn't mean that there's 100% voting in one direction, but it's one of the two of them.
Moses Leota is way better than Blake Lawrie. Like, that is for sure.
A lot of people are better than Blake Lawrie. I do like Blake Lawrie, though.
Yeah. Of course you do. So that's interesting. I think Scott Sorensen and Jordan Ricky are going to be playing directly against each other as well. Jordan Ricky on the right edge for the Broncos, Scott Sorensen on the left edge. Sorensen is like an Aotearoa Kiwis player. Like, all the Panthers players, they're already Aotearoa Kiwis players. Jordan Ricky, he could be a starting edge forward for the Kiwis. He's definitely going to be in the squad. And then I've said it a few times, Arthurs might be in the mix, especially because I think Greg Mars, who's going to play for Samoa. But you still have for the Kiwis, Rapana, Watene Zalesniak, Mulatalo, and Isako. Mulatalo and Isako, I believe they're going to stay with the Kiwis for the next few years under Michael Maguire. If Arthurs isn't, like, I don't think he's better than those four wingers, and you only need two wingers, so there's a lot of wingers available. Arthurs will definitely be in the Aotearoa A squad, which is a interesting thing to keep an eye on, because there will be a second-tier Aotearoa Kiwis group named alongside the international test matches coming up. So I think Arthurs is certified of that tier. I can see him getting into a Kiwis squad as kind of a depth development opportunity for him as well. And it's like these two teams. So Fisher Harris, he's from the Hokianga in Northland. Jordan Ricky is from Christchurch. So the players in this grand final from Aotearoa come from the far north and like halfway down the South Island, Christchurch. That's the sign of the Kiwi-NRL times, and this goes back to the state of rugby league in Aotearoa. We're talking about Fisher Harris as chasing the best prop in the game. He's from a small town in Hokianga. Jordan Ricky, and I wrote this in the preview, like, these players all have exceptional mana in terms of how they play rugby league. Their effort areas, their physicality, their vitality. Like, Ricky is cut from that cloth. He doesn't put up big stats, but he's always leading the kick chase. He's always putting a shot on. He's always covering inside channels and working hard for his teammates. And that is the energy that gives you consistent game time in the NRL as a youngster, coming straight out of Aotearoa. Because the Broncos signed him as soon as he left school. I think they signed him before he left school, St. Thomas of Canterbury, and like many great of the best recruitment stories from Aotearoa, like the best NRL teams, they cater to the needs of the junior. So if they need to stay in New Zealand and finish their school, be around their family, that's all good. Ricky finished school, goes to the Broncos, within a couple years, maybe 2 years, he's playing NRL. He's a starting edge forward, 80 minutes every game. That's because he has the same effort and attitude and work rate and mana as Fisher Harris, as Leota, as Scott Sorensen. And you're seeing seeds of that in how Jesse Arthurs plays as well. Like Jesse Arthurs runs really hard. And I actually think he's got potential to be, like, compared to Watene Zalesniak, Arthurs is faster. He's got a bit more zip, bit better footwork. He's just not as experienced. But I think Arthurs has potential to be a high-quality Aotearoa Kiwis winger as well. And he's a notable junior because ever since he emerged through the Gold Coast system, he was in the Toda Here program back in 2016. He goes to Storm, Rabbitohs, Titans, then to the Broncos, Loandale to the Warriors, back to the Broncos. He's been on a bit of a journey, but he's always been in the New Zealand Rugby League mixer, and he's always commanded an opportunity. Like, he's down in the Broncos depth chart. The Warriors want him on a loan deal. Like, he's always commanded a next opportunity, and right now he's keeping Corey Oates, Dean Mariner out of this team. And that's a good sign for him. I also so the Panthers, they've got Dayon Amatuanai and Preston Ricky in their basically reserve grade team. Amatuanai's a winger from Otaki. He came through Hatupaora College in the kind of wider Wellington, Manawatu region. Warriors SG Ball. And then with Preston Ricky, where's Preston Ricky from? Rawini, the Hokianga region. So the Panthers have 2 players from Hokianga in their system right now. Preston Ricky moves down to Auckland. He's in the Warriors system. Preston Ricky and Amatuanai go to Redcliffe with the Warriors, and then the Panthers sign them from Redcliffe Warriors. They are 2 youngsters who are cooking in the Panthers system slowly. And that's the key thing here. Amatuanai, he's moving between Jersey Flegg, New South Wales Cup. He's done that for 2 seasons. Preston Ricky's played New South Wales Cup for 2 seasons. Neither of them has come close to playing NRL for the Panthers, because they're just in the system, working hard week after week, and they will play NRL for the Panthers, I believe. But it's that slow grind, that slow development process, which didn't happen for Dean Mariner or Xavier Willison in the Broncos system, but because of the Broncos' depth, they're not getting the game time, so that's where things slow down. That's where you get the development progress made. But because I think they've both made their debuts maybe last year. Willison might have been the year before. And they're still not top 17 players at the end of 2023. Even though, as I've said a few times, they would be playing top 17 at a lot of other NRL teams. Dean Mariner has a chance to represent Samoa, I reckon. Again, Aotearoa Kiwis, they're flush with outside backs. He could play Aotearoa A. But if your decision is between Aotearoa A and Samoa or Tonga, you're probably going to play international footy, aren't you? So that's all good. Willison's a Cook Islands international already. He's from the Waikato. And the Broncos, they've also got Kaius Fa'atili, who's from Christchurch, same school as Jordan Ricky, same rep teams as Jordan Ricky. He's with Wynnum, and there's another notable Broncos junior from New Zealand. Hopefully I get the name right. Nathaniel Tangamaitaiti. He's from Ellerslie in Auckland. He is with Wynnum as well in the Broncos system. Both teams have Kiwi-NRL juniors from around Aotearoa in their system, and both teams have the slow development process going on as well. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they are the best teams, and that's how they operate with their junior players.
Yeah, well, that was something we talked about last week, wasn't it? About how the best teams put themselves in a position to develop players better, and then they do develop players better if they want to be the teams who then turn that into dynasties do take advantage of that and bring those guys in, which gives them multi-layered teams where it's not just we have this great 17. This year is going to be incredible. Maybe next year is going to be incredible. But will we still be the same team in 5 years? Unlikely, without being able to refresh it along the way. But those best teams are able to do that, and it's by thinking ahead. It's by having those systems, and you got to have them in place even before you get to that spot if you want to keep it rolling along in a way that the Panthers have done. Like, they are the dynastic team of the I don't know. At this point, you start getting to where you have to begin to compare them to what the Melbourne Storm have done under the tenure of Craig Bellamy, or what the Broncos did when Wayne Bennett was there through the 90s and beyond, long before stuff I can remember. There's a few others in there. And the Broncos are trying to be that team. And, the Warriors are trying to be that team as well. They're not as far, well, they're a lot closer now than they were a year ago, put it that way. I'll say it again. That's going to be a fascinating grand final.
We've also got the NRL Women's Grand Final, Titans versus Knights. Titans have Niall Williams-Guthrie, who I mentioned on Monday, reminds me of Steve Matai, which is as good as you want to be for a centre, especially a centre from Aotearoa, and Georgia Hale, the best tackler in NRLW by a significant margin. It's not even close. That's Georgia Hale. And Georgia Hale is in her best year as far as tackling, running, and even winning goes. The Knights have Shanice Parker and Abigail Roach as their centres. I think Williams-Guthrie will line up against Roach, which will be really interesting to see how that goes. I'll dive into that before I do the preview there on the website. And they've also got Lyshawn Albert-Jones playing edge forward. Obviously, you see the headlines, Niall Williams-Guthrie, sister of Sonny Bill, like all that stuff. Again, these things run deep. Like Lyshawn Albert-Jones, I believe, is the niece of Stacey Jones.
Hey, All Blacks assistant coach. Oh, no, wait.
Not a good All Blacks team, though. I don't think it's going to work out for Stacey Jones and Mooks. Although Mooks, he's a much better assistant coach than head coach. So as long as he's not the All Blacks head coach, he should be all right. And obviously, Mooks is looking after All Blacks defense. Stacey Jones looking after All Blacks attack. That makes way more sense.
Teaching Beauden Barrett how to do the chip and chase.
If you're following the Wallabies recipe, though, Brett Hodgson, he's a fullback who's way better at attack.
Yeah. Can
you just Google this while I'm looking to confirm? Like,
yeah,
Brett Hodgson, I think he's defense coach, because it makes no sense. But Lyshawn Albert-Jones, she was a half for the Kiwi Ferns as recently as the World Cup last year. Abigail Roach was also, she got games in the halves for the Kiwi Ferns at the World Cup. So now Roach is playing centre. Lyshawn Albert-Jones is playing edge forward. The Lyshawn Albert-Jones, Roach was playing Super Rugby Aupiki earlier this year before joining the Knights. Lyshawn Albert-Jones was playing, I think she was playing for Mounties in the New South Wales Women's Premiership earlier this year. Williams-Guthrie came from Sevens Rugby League. Hale's been NRLW. I think Hale, she goes back and forth with Leeds in England between NRLW seasons. And all of these players are Kiwi Ferns eligible as well. I said Hale and the Knights trio, they've already played for the Kiwi Ferns. Williams-Guthrie is going to be in the Kiwi Ferns. And the theme for the men, Aotearoa Kiwis players in the NRL Grand Final, or Kiwi-NRL players, is their efforts, their mana, their attitude. The 1%ers, the small details, they all epitomise that effort and energy. Kiwi Ferns storylines for the NRL women is the depth. Because there's 3 centres in this grand final, let alone the 5 other centres playing NRLW. You got Lyshawn Albert-Jones playing edge forward. You're going to have Otessa Pule from the Roosters playing edge forward. Kere Hatina Matua from the Raiders is an edge forward as well. There's a lot of depth on show here for the Kiwi Ferns in NRLW, and the 2 best teams are the Titans and the Knights. and they both have a lot of talent across their whole teams, but sneakily, these Kiwi Fern players are really, really good. And they're really, really good in the two best teams for NRLW. That is really impressive, I believe.
Can tell you that Brett Hodgson is the defensive coach for the Wallabies.
Yeah, so that means Jason Rolls is the attack coach, which makes extra no sense. Because Hodgson's an attacking player.
It doesn't say on their thing. I found a thing where it announced the had changes and Riles wasn't there because that was from
I think he's the attack
from
coach.
May, and he's come in since then.
Yeah.
So he must be the attack coach because there's no one else listed as attack coach on their coaching staff website.
Riles is a defense coach usually. I think he was a defense coach for England under Eddie Jones, and I think most of his NRL coaching has been primarily defense focused as well. So the All Blacks part of this means that Stephen Kearney Mooks is running the All Blacks attack, and Stacey Jones is running the All Blacks defense, which is bonkers.
Brad Davis was the attack coach appointed in May, which is what I was talking about in the earlier thing, and he quit in August 17th. He quit like pretty close to the thing, and Riles came in. It says here, Rugby League confirmed Davis, a former rugby league player and longtime coach in the United Kingdom, would return to deal with a personal matter or whatever. So that's why he quit. But he was a rugby league guy as well, apparently. So it's just a like-for-like swap in the end.
How not to win rugby union games? Hire rugby league people to do weird jobs. Like it's great stuff.
It's like getting baseball players to coach the Blackcaps, I guess.
Well, we've already made the All Blacks comparison. Like it works out well. Mooks and Stacey Jones.
We take it further and get like, I don't know, Brad Sorensen or someone to be the next Blackcaps attack coach. Teach him how to slug some sixes cross-batted.
So Razor's mate, Ryan from Canterbury, forwards coach, like really good coach who's on the All Black staff right now. He's doing a lot of great stuff. No, don't worry about him. We got Stacey Jones.
Yeah.
Alrighty, football. Like a bit of football. I want to leave some time and space for National League, so let's just kind of roll through some of these Football Ferns All Whites things a bit quicker. Football Ferns, did you learn anything new from their series in Chile? Like, yeah, we know the situation. You couldn't watch the second game, the logistics, all this stuff. We've covered some really detailed stuff on Monday and across all our content. Did you learn anything new?
See, I've been trying to find a way to attack the article that I'm going to write about this. I think the reason it's so difficult to come up with just an intro, to come up like my, I don't mean intro as in like the first paragraph. I mean the intro as in like, how do I get myself into this headspace to find a flow for the article? I think the reason is that the answer to your question is no. I'm not sure we did learn anything new about the Football Ferns. It's the same thing where they've been in a difficult spot. They start the series poorly. They get better in the second game, even though by the sounds of it, they actually, made quite a few changes for the second game, performed a lot better, which makes you wonder why they had so much trouble in the first game. Like, I did mention when we talked about that on Monday, I do think that was an instance where, where Yitka Clover has had a lot of pressure because of the results, and I think a lot of that hasn't really been her fault. I do think she's got a copper for the first game because the tactics just didn't work. But I talked about that on Monday. The fact is, like, some of those things are trends. The fact they often the first game of a series is worse than the next game in a tour. That's something that's been a recurring theme. I'll try to break that down a little bit more because I want to see just how much that is true. But then the other thing is, like, whenever the Football Ferns get these stink-ass results, it's the same thing that's true all the time, is that they're always missing key players. And when they roughed it up against Chile in the first game, one of the disappointing things there was that their defense was first choice, and their defense was struggling. So I was surprised by that, including Vic Heston. I thought it's worst I've seen her play for quite a while for the football Ferns, like the worst I've seen her play full stop for the football Ferns, because she's basically been brilliant every time she's played for the national team until that game. Like, I think that's one where she was not at her best. And you can make cases about players being in preseason or early season and not being in prime form, or World Cup hangovers and stuff like that. But the other factor that you have with there is they could have been 1-0 up in that first game. Like, they had a couple of nice chances. They started all right the first 20 minutes. When they had the ball in the Chilean half, they were fine. It was when Chile pressed them and against their defense where they struggled, because their midfield was not set up to be able to withstand that. So their defense didn't have any options. So the defense is giving the ball away. That's inviting pressure. Basically, all the Chile goals came from turnovers in their own half, and there you go. But they could, if they'd scored first and been 1-0 up, who knows? But like, Gabby Rennie missed a couple chances, and there you go. And why is Gabby Rennie playing? Gabby Rennie's playing because Olivia Chance isn't fit. Olivia Chance isn't fit. Neither is Jackie Hand, apparently, even though she's been playing club football. And Rhea Percival wasn't available because she's still, getting back to 100% from her knee injury and these kind of things. Like, the football Ferns can't afford to miss key players, because the players they have to call up can't do as well. And if they're not putting their best 11 out there, then, we've seen even when they have their best 11, they still can't score goals very well. So imagine what it's like when you take out probably the two most creative players they've had in the last couple. Well, Liv Chance over the last 4 years has been their most creative player. I'd say Jackie Hand over the last 6 months has been their best creative player. That's quite a significant blow. And unfortunately, like, I was shocked. I was updating my spreadsheets and stuff for some footy Ferns, trying to keep counts of lineups and stuff so I'm aware of these trends. I've been doing this for ages, but I was updating them. Shocked to realize Gabby Rennie's now got 30 caps. Like, she's still at college in the USA, and I like Gabby Rennie a lot as a player. She was a real good prospect for Canterbury coming up, playing under 17s for New Zealand. She shouldn't have 30 caps. Like, she's not even in a professional environment yet, and she hasn't even been a regular starter throughout her college career. She shouldn't be playing that regular where she's getting games every single time. I do think there's a little bit of you can make a similar case for Paige Satchel to a little bit lesser extent, because Satchel's shown a little bit more, but still is someone who, like, the end product's not there, and we're desperate for end product. And the Phoenix just got rid of Satchel at a time where they're trying to find out how to score better goals. Football Ferns are still leaning on players like Satchel and Rennie, who are good players and who will have deserved opportunities. They've just maybe gotten too many opportunities. And I wonder if it's just time, only really in the attacking third. And she might bring Hannah Wilkinson into this as well. I'm not sure. I think she does lose a bit of goodwill for getting sent off in the first Chilean game. I thought that was rather unacceptable. That's, I wonder if it's time for a little bit of a shake-up, and maybe we've seen that because there are players already like Indy Riley, Millie Clegg. Now I think on this tour, it's probably the only player who improved her standings. But Indy Riley certainly did the World Cup. I think Grace Jala has always been deserving of a more prominent role than she's been allowed to, and I think they should try her as a centre forward. Jackie Hand obviously is very good, and they right now, as it stands, the Football Ferns, one of their biggest problems is that the elite level depth is not good enough to where they can drop players who are out of form. It's getting there because it happened with Michaela Moore for the World Cup. That's in defense though. Like, we've got a lot of options in defense. I should mention Claudia Bunge is another player who didn't partake in any of these games. She might not be first 11, but if she's not, she's 12th. It's only because we've got two really good centre backs. It hasn't really been the case, certainly not in attacking areas though, where they've just had to keep picking the same project players over and over, because there just isn't anyone where if they're not playing well, we drop them because someone else is commanding a better opportunity. The stuff we could talk, like stuff similar to what you're saying about Kiwi's depth, and they can pick an A team that's good enough to beat most international teams, A team with players who were all competing for first team things. A Football Ferns A team wouldn't look like that yet. But it's not that far away. Like, that depth is coming. It is on the way. And honestly, to some extent, it might arrive as soon as next month when the next A-League season kicks off, because there is a little influx of attacking depth in particular coming in the A-League next time. And Devin Jackson, Ruby Nathan, Hannah Blake is another player. Maggie Jenkins, I think, is coming into her last year of college. She's someone who, once she gets out of the college system, which will be towards the end of the A-League season, she could pop up in the way that Hannah Blake did last year with Perth. Um, there's let alone Phoenix Academy players pushing through as well. There is depth coming. It's not there yet, and it needs to be nurtured at a professional level before it can be commanding international stuff. But yeah, unfortunately, what we're seeing from the football Ferns is still the lingering effects of the previous way of doing things. So we might just have to ride that out for a little bit until the cavalry arrives. Basically, is the issue there. So no, I didn't learn anything from them, but I'm still encouraged about the direction they can be on. It's just they're not there yet,
Well, it's the start of a World Cup cycle. This is where new players emerge. This is where you give those opportunities to different players to the football Ferns don't need to win games right now. They need to win major tournament games. They need to score goals at major tournaments, Olympics, World Cups. An away series in Chile where one of the games wasn't broadcasted, that's not the time to really be showcasing all your razzle dazzle. It's just the time to put a few building blocks down and keep it moving. Keep on trucking into the flying Kiwis rounds where most of those players will return.
Yeah, and I hope that is what happens, because there is, that's what I'm saying about maybe the attacking areas in particular need just a little bit of a shake-up, and now is the time to start giving some of those other, and we did see some of that, so that is encouraging. Like Millie Clegg started the second game. A few of those extra options, it's like, let's just see what we can do, because we know it's what we've got at the moment and how we've been doing this is not good enough. So it's good, but it's not good enough. And we see that whenever they play against better teams, it's like that you need to at least give yourself something, and looking for maybe a little bit of just searching for some X factor in some players. And there are a few who might be able to do that kind of stuff. And maybe now is when you have to begin to think about that, because they can't just stay doing the same thing, which we know only works up to a certain level, and that level is not where they're aiming to be, which is winning major tournament games. That's the issue. But yeah, like I said on Monday, maybe this will be a little bit of a shake-up, because we did see some of that. I'd like to see them lean a little bit more further into that. But for the most part, the first Chilean game, or both these Chilean games, because they conceded 5 goals, but for the most part, defensively, they're good. Great crop of goalkeepers. Midfield's all right. It's just that attack in third, A lot of the blocks are there.
We also had an all-whites squad named by the saviour of New Zealand football, Darren Baisley. They will play games
Baysmeister.
Some call him the Baysmeister.
Right. Do they?
That's what he said. They play Congo, the Democratic Republic, maybe of Congo, Dr. Congo, and they also play the All Whites in England. Be very interesting to see what happens against. They play Australia. Sorry, they are the All Whites. They play against Australia and England. Given that there was a corresponding fixture in New Zealand, I think it was late last year.
Yeah, September-ish.
They now have a couple of games against Australia as a measuring stick. We won't go too deep into this, but we did touch on the inclusions of Tyler Bindon from Reading and old mate Matt Dibley-Diaz from Fulham. We did touch on that in the subscriber podcast, and I'm sure there'll be, you'll write about it, you'll drop a lot more information. Are there any, I was interested because they are the only 2 dudes with 0 caps in the squad, and they are both, it's not like they're ho-hum New Zealand football prospects. They are, as we discussed in the subscriber podcast, major recruitment wins for New Zealand football and All Whites football, so that's a bonus. You got Sarpreet Singh's back in there. We just had an Elijah Just goal, which was razzle dazzle. He's there. Old mate Joey C, Joey Champness, musical extraordinaire. He's back in the mix. Step over God, so shout out to him. Those are like my highlights for what it's worth. What's kind of one or two pockets that you're really interested in, especially with the Flying Kiwis context around it?
Yeah, I would say that, well, you know what? I think the highlight of the squad isn't so much a specific player as it is just because we've just talked about that football phone stuff. It's the fact that, you know, exactly what the football ferns aren't yet able to do, the All Whites are, because they're just a couple years further ahead on the same trajectory, just a couple years further ahead. The All Whites have just picked a squad that has no A-League players in it. And they've done it on purpose because they're saying these guys are, late in their preseason, they're not match fit, but they are sort of like, well, and also it would disrupt flying over to Europe and then back right before week 1 of the season would disrupt their potential availability for their clubs at that point. They just decided it was the easiest thing to do not to pick those guys and just be like, well, we'll come back. You guys come back into contention for the November window. But for this one, we're just going to focus on European and American-based players. And they have, and it's still a good squad. You know, they're not really going to miss those A-League guys too much. There's a bit of depth, sure, but there's other depth that's available in other positions from other, parts of the world, just Kiwi players being around. And that also does open up the room for Dibley Diaz and Bindon to not just be in the squad, but probably to get debuts as well. Like, that factor is the thing that stands out the most, is that they can just not pick A-League players. The football ferns wouldn't have a team if they didn't pick A-League players, you know?
Who from the A-League is better than the players selected there?
I wouldn't agree with this personally, but there is a case of Ollie Sale as starting goalkeeper. I think Clayton Lewis, not in the first 11, but he might be pushing, like, popping up off the bench for the last 15 minutes kind of territory. But I don't know that he's particularly better than, that bench might have Callum McCowart and Eli Just on it, in which case, no, Lewis wouldn't be playing ahead of them. It just depends on formations and where guys go. But the main one would probably be Tim Payne at right back, is I think probably our best right back. But I don't think, we'll see what Nico Cohen's looks like, because I haven't seen a lot of him since he came back from his knee injury, but he seems to be going all right. He captained Padova a couple weeks ago. That's third tier in Italy, so it's not amazing. But he is they are one of the better teams in third tier in Italy. Should be pushing for promotion this year again. He's, that's your backup. That's not too bad. I will say that depth might get tested a little more because McGarry's been picked. James McGarry's been recalled. Don't really think he's going to make it because he's got a hamstring injury at the moment. Tommy Smith sounds like he'll be okay. Matt Garbutt sounds like he'll be okay. Bill Toiloma sounds like he'll be okay. But those guys have been dealing with injuries. But at the same time, if we're talking about depth, it's not like everyone, like Brian Thomas isn't there either. Like there's still that potential to come. But no, they're not really going to miss the A-League players, and that's the best. Let's also, this is a couple steps down the line, but that's also where the football firms want to get to. It's like, you can pick the A-League players, sure, but you pick the ones who are in form and really doing well, like how Australia does. There are a couple A-League players, men's and women's teams for them usually, but they're the superstar standouts. It's not the solid job doers of the A-League. We want solid job doers in the English Super League or in the English Premier League or whatever, we want those guys, the solid job doers. They make our national teams, no dramas. The solid job doers in Australia, not so much. Great depth for the country, but not necessarily for the national team. And that's the football ferns aren't there yet. The All Whites are there, which is beautiful. This is actually a step forward for the team in that way. This is a new development, and it's without, I didn't see Logan Rogerson there, Ollie White. There are other professionals who aren't in these, like Jamie Searle as a goalkeeper too. There's other guys who could be there that aren't. It's not like they've picked all of the European players. They've still been able to, without picking A-League dudes, still been able to balance it a little bit towards form and fitness too. And Dalton Wilkins is someone who I think might has a good chance to come in if McGarry is ruled out. Like there's more where this came from.
Let's get into National League. We'll finish our niche cast today with National League football. I got questions, so I'll just ask questions. You can fire off an answer, and we'll keep it moving.
Yeah, love it.
So the winners in the men's National League, we got Wellington Olympic, Napier City, Auckland United, Auckland City, Christchurch United. Women's winners from last weekend, we got Western Springs, Wellington Phoenix, Auckland United, Eastern Suburbs, and then the two capital teams, or two central teams, as you said on Monday, the CF, they had a draw. My first question, what's the difference between Christchurch United and Canterbury United?
Oh, Christchurch United is a club and Canterbury United is a federation team. So Canterbury United, which only exists now on the women's side of things, but there used to be a Canterbury United in the men's team back when they had federation teams there as well. Canterbury United Pride is a fed team. They're selecting from a bunch of clubs. Christchurch United is just one club that exists as their own thing, top to bottom. They are a well-funded team, though. Like, they're the dominant force in Canterbury men's football.
Is there Russian oligarch overlord guy? Does he fund Canterbury football as well, or is it just Christchurch United?
I don't think so. I think it's just the club. But I mean, they have now the best functioning academy probably in the whole of the South Island. So yeah, he's funding it in an indirect way. Like, they're developing players, but it's through Christchurch United, the club.
But some of the younger female players, or some of the female players in Canterbury United, they might be playing women's football for Christchurch United.
No, not the good ones. Maybe the young ones. I'm not sure what their women's team is like, but they weren't in the South Island League. So in the women's side, you still got like Kashmir Tech's women's team is very good. Coastal Spirits very good. Then the Dunedin City Royals are also good in the South Island. Those are probably the dominant forces. I don't know where Christchurch United are. I would imagine they're building up towards that, but for now it seems mostly on the men's side. But that is a club with a lot of history. Like, they were winning Chatham Cups in the 70s and 80s.
So because you have talked about this a few times, the hub, the kind of, and this applies to NRL as well, like the wave of football in the Canterbury region, as you said, kind of funded and overseen by a very generous Russian geezer. But he hasn't really taken that into women's football yet. So there might be a next wave where that really flows into women's football in that region as well. More so the winners in the women's competition, Western Springs are there, Auckland United's there, Eastern Suburbs is there. It is timely. There is that chat about the Auckland A-League team, and all three of those teams are in Auckland. They've only had one win, so it's nothing notable. But are there any bigger links or any bigger context to each of those teams? Are they affiliated with any bigger organization, or is it just kind of three teams in Auckland? You got the west side, you got the east side, which isn't how it's framed at all, and then you've got Auckland United as well.
Yeah. Eastern Suburbs is pretty eastern. Western Springs is, Western Springs, so it's only the start of the west. It gets a lot westier than that. West Coast Rangers would be the dominant.
They certainly aren't.
But it is.
They certainly aren't west side or east side. They're Eastern Suburbs and Western Springs. And
it's like Koimarama. It's a nice coastal breeze. I think I mentioned it looked like in that Eastern Suburbs game. Yeah, and Greyland.
Anyone outside Auckland, Koimarama, Greyland, Western Springs area, very affluent suburbs in Auckland.
Yeah, and who are Auckland United is like that's general central Auckland. That's like
former Central United.
No, former Three Kings and Onehunga Sports. So it's like south of the central. Kithe Park is where they play. That's a massive. It's like 18 grounds there, and they've got football, hockey, and all sorts. And that's where they're based. So and then Ellerslie is a little bit, similar region, a little bit further south from that.
Yeah, but Is there any bigger affiliation to those three teams?
No, but they don't need them. I mean, you could say so in the terms of Auckland United, and that they are a merger club. Like I had mentioned that, Three Kings only hung a connection there. So that there's that. Like that is a combination, a recent merger of two clubs, Eastern Suburbs and especially Western Springs. They don't have bigger affiliations necessarily. Like they don't have anyone pumping thing in from some other football club or anything, but definitely Western Springs is borderline the biggest club in the country. I would argue it's in the most populous city, and it's potentially the biggest club in Auckland, just in terms of like total members, like teams entered in leagues from the most social of the social right up to the highest competitive level. That club is huge. You're huge. You got a lot of subs coming in. You got money, and if you got money, you got power. So I think they're sort of their own thing. And then Eastern Suburbs, not quite as big, but still fairly big, and very affluent part of the country is where that club is based. So I would imagine you get some, but then at the same time, like from what I understand, Manurewa's got some, like they've got a few. Do we call them wealthy benefactors? I don't know. Like there's members who are putting money into the club to help them. That's across the board. Everyone has that. So,
but there's no greater affiliation to any professional academy or anything.
No, other than their own. But as I say, like their academies are still pretty good because those are big clubs.
Who is better, Canterbury United or Southern United for the women?
We'll find that out. We'll find that out. But it's hard to say right now. But traditionally, it's Canterbury United. Last year, it looked like Southern for a bit, but Canterbury came home strong. I think Canterbury might be a little bit weaker than that, and I was really impressed by. I thought Southern were going to quite struggle. If you asked me a week ago, I'd have said Canterbury all day. But it'll be an interesting one to follow, is which of those teams, because Central are coming last. Don't worry about that. But which one of the other two Fed teams finishes higher than the other? Same as who finishes higher out of those two capital teams, the Waterside Karori and Wellington United. To be safe, probably still going to say Canterbury in terms of the Canterbury Southern thing, but I was impressed by Southern. I think they got a really good defense thing. Even though they've lost a lot of players, they've maintained a good spine from last year to this year. And Amy Hislop gives them a number 9 option, which I think everyone needs. That is that just a goal scoring striker who can hold the ball up and drag their team forward further up the field. Something that maybe Southern lacked last year, and they have it now. So there's potential for them. I don't know that there's crazy depth if key players get injured there, but their first 11 is going to be competitive with anyone, except maybe those Auckland teams.
And you said Central, but they are different to the Central Football Wellington United and Central Football Waterside Karori.
Well, it's capital football for them, but it's the Central League, if that makes sense.
Sorry, the logo looks like it's Central, but it is capital. My bad. Yeah. My bad. Who's the best player?
Because Central League is a combination of the Central region and the Capital region. So, yeah.
Who's the best players to watch out for in the women's team early doors?
From Karori and Wellington United, or just across the league? Okay, across the whole league. Well, Taylor O'Brien is the rating MVP for Eastern Suburbs, so there's that. But she didn't play in the first round. I would say... like best of the best, we're talking like just the elite players, the standouts. It's 10 teams and a lot of good players and a lot of good positions. Eastern Suburbs and Western Springs feel like the best teams right now. I know Auckland United won the regional league, but I think Suburbs and Springs, where you've got like Suburbs, Taylor O'Brien and I think Saki Yoshida is a fantastic player for them. They got some good forwards, Nicole Medham, Nicole Cooper as well. Zoe Benson is a youngster to keep an eye out, who could have a big season. So they're pretty well stacked. Western Springs, looking at like Lily Jervis at the back. American goalkeeper Mickey Mitchell seems pretty handy. They also got an American striker, Sofia Garcia, one of the best. sounds like they've got their Japanese players back from last year as well. Rina Hirano and Arisa Takeda, who are fantastic, but spent the year. They went overseas, and I think they played in Canada. But apparently they're coming back for the summer season, so that's cool. Lara Colby is someone in that same under 20s age group as Zoe Benson, who's a really talented player. There's a lot to look for. I've enjoyed, because I've watched Western Springs a couple of times because they were also in the Chatham Cup final, and I like the look of Tiana Hill as a fullback who's from the Waikato region. Used to play she actually played with Hamilton Wanderers in the what do you call it? The Kate Shepherd Cup final three times ago. It was started last year, but it was the 2021 version. That was a Hamilton Wanderers squad that also had Michaela Foster was in that team. Mania Elliott, who's now with the Wellington Phoenix. Chelsea Elliott, who's playing for Auckland United. I think Riley Godbold might have been their goalkeeper, who's played under 20s for New Zealand. She's playing the thing. I was noticing that team recently because I was looking at where some of these Phoenix players coming from, and noticing just how, like, I think women's football in general, there's some strong players coming out of that Waikato region, and none of them play for the Waikato teams anymore. It's the weird part. But there's more coming through, because Laura Bennett was, I think, player of the tournament at the under 16. She's from Melville.
So you did mention like 10 players there. Taylor O'Brien is a notable one. That's one I'm going to be watching out for, because you did say she was amazing last season. And the wing back you just said from the Waikato region, Tiana Hill. I like it. For the men, who are... Try and narrow it down. Just give us like 2 or 3 players just for folks to watch out for. Like, you're the National League expert from Aotearoa. So who do you think are the best players in the men's National League right now?
Well, if you want me to narrow this down, I'm not going to pick an Auckland City or a Wellington Olympic player, because you could go through basically their starting 11s and some of their benches and just pick class players from top to bottom there. So outside of those two, Garvin Coughlin for sure, Irish striker for Kashmir Technical, is as good as anyone in the country. Creates goals, he scores goals, he's brilliant. Francis de Vries, playing left back for Eastern Suburbs, of course, a recently capped All Whites player and just coming back from a knee injury, so he spent the year getting his reps in at Eastern Suburbs. That's a big shout. I'm increasingly becoming a very big fan of Matt Todd-Smith for Christchurch United in the midfield. I think he's fantastic. And also, if you're watching Christchurch United, definitely pay attention to their both Kiwi dudes, as well as strike force of Sam Phillip, who's ex-Wellington Phoenix Academy, went over to college in the States and has come back and was top scorer in the Southern League, and also Eddie Wilkinson, who was real good for them last year, but then went and spent the winter season playing in Australia. Now he's back. Eddie Wilkinson scored an unreal goal on the weekend for them to beat Eastern Suburbs. He's just, think about him the way you think about like a point guard in basketball who doesn't pass but shoots all the time. You know, one of those guys who just, you know how they talk about creating their own shot in basketball? That's what Eddie Wilkinson does. It's just, he gets the ball. He's so good at dribbling. He always finds space to get the shot away. And he's pretty good when he gets the shot away as well. And that's why he's scoring key goals like he did in that big one against Suburbs.
Mandatory Wellington Phoenix check-in as we wrap up here. There was a signing, Supik, young.
Yeah, Luke Supik, younger brother of Adam Supik, who also went through the academy and I think is at Eastern Suburbs now.
Is he going to be playing for the Wellington Phoenix reserves and or any other notable? Because the Wellington Phoenix men, they are making a habit of signing a lot of their local academy kind of players. Are they all in this reserves team? Is it just a couple? Like, what's the breakdown there?
Well, they didn't have any contracted players in week 1. We'll see what that looks like down the line, because when the season starts in 3 or 4 weeks for the next, then maybe there'll be players who get released because they're not in the match day squad. At the moment, it seems like they just want everyone training, and because they didn't sign anyone from outside the club except for a couple backups from Newcastle, that's taken a lot of the depth out of the academy team. But the academy team was still pretty good on the weekend. I'm super impressed, especially by their defense, holding out Auckland City to just a 1-0 defeat. It was pretty solid. But yeah, I don't know how much we'll see those guys play for the reserves. That's something I'm I'm keeping a close eye on because I was hoping to get a good look at Luke Supik, and hopefully still will. But because he's 17 years old, I think he was the top scorer or equal top scorer with someone from one of the other countries at the Oceania under 17s. Seems like a genuine goal scorer, like a striker who scores goals. Just had the knack for scoring goals, putting the ball in the back of the net, the way that I don't think the Phoenix Academy has had since Ben Waine. And so I was pretty curious by like the outputs there. He'd been playing a few Central League games. He's good. He would be playing here if he wasn't on a senior contract. I think maybe they will be keeping him around the first team picture though. But we'll see. I would like to see them release a few players now and then to get some reps in at this level because we did see it from the women, like Emma Main, Mackenzie Barry, plus two of their scholarship players, Zoe McMeekin and Mania Elliott. They all played for the women on the weekend, so maybe the men's team, who usually do that, but we'll see because, as I say, the squad is smaller and much more internal than it has been in the past, and that's probably something we should talk about in the future. But it's maybe that's a big conversation that'll that direction of that team is too big of a conversation to fit in the last few seconds of this podcast.
The similarities between the Warriors and the Phoenix, they are increasingly...
It's definitely something I want to talk about at some point. Yeah.
And by that, we mean their embrace of junior talent from Aotearoa and how invested they are financially as well as every other way in developing that junior talent. So it is an interesting storyline we will update over the next few months, I'm sure. That's the Niche Cast for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Big up yourself, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful. Cha-cha!